Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for ThatShelf.com, and I'm joined by Team That Shelf to talk about TIFF 2021.
Big shelf.
So, hey guys, I guess we've sort of survived TIFF. How's it worked out?
Oh, pretty good. I need to sleep a bit more and then see if I survive. But overall, it was good. It was fun.
And Victor, how was it for you?
Any TIFF where I can get more than 6 hours of sleep a night is a win for me.
And Emma, you were just doing so much. You were not only reviewing, but sort of keeping the home front going. How was this festival for you?
Yeah, it didn't actually, considering it was a hybrid and something new for everybody, it didn't actually change that much on the back end for me. And I did a lot of digital last year, so it was pretty much same. But yeah, the 6 hours plus sleep a night was a bonus. I have to agree with Victor there.
And Courtney?
For me, it was good. I did the virtual edition, which was a lot more tiring than I thought it would be, because you still have like real life kind of reminding you that there's other things going on outside of the film festival, mainly kids and taking them to school and all that type of stuff. So it just made it was different this year.
From my perspective, I mean, I've said this a lot. This was my 25th TIFF, and it never felt weirder. I think last year we sort of gave a lot of leeway. We sort of allowed it to be something that it wasn't. But there's so much that really didn't work that I thought probably could have worked. Everything from some of the programming choices to some of the technical issues. On the other hand, I had an amazing Tuesday. I kept going on about the great Tuesday I had. And I just had one of those days where it just felt like, oh my God, this is why I do this. Why are we so crazy doing this? And it was a one movie, a couple interviews, and actually a dinner, and then running into a bunch of people. I ran in a pad at the screening, and it just felt normal for a brief enough window that it actually energized me, and it made me remember why the hell we do this in the first place. But
And
Courtney,
I
if you
think,
could,
oh,
yeah,
just
go
to
on,
show how
Pat. Sorry.
crazy that was Sunday.
So there you
I'm
go.
just looking at my tipper, and yeah,
I
Sunday
thought it
did
was a
not,
Tuesday.
Tuesday I did not run into you.
Hilarious.
But
There you go. I've been going on about having this great Tuesday, and it was a Sunday. I've been saying that for days. So thank you, Pat. This is by the way why I definitely need this an amazing team that's sort of helping me like make basic errors corrected. Emma, you were absolutely on the ball with that. If you could just talk about sort of your own sort of emergence in this of going to a few films in person after all of this time, but still managing to navigate the craziness of the online streaming services.
Yeah, it is a bit different. I was heading it from the public side this year, so I wasn't accredited. So I was buying public tickets, going through that journey, which was pretty much the same as any other year in terms of buying tickets online and that kind of thing. The going back in person though, that was only my in-person ones were only my second and third in theater since the pandemic began. So like February 2020. So it was a really interesting experience because you kind of go with the mindset of it's the regular TIFF back again. And then you go in and you're like, oh no, it's not. I mean, we all have our masks on, but it's also the social distancing. You can't tell a sellout from a non-sellout. It has a very weird kind of vibe, especially when it comes to ovations or clapping and things like that. And it sounds very lackluster, even if you can tell everybody loved the movie because it's just the smaller capacity. And I think that's the part that I had the hardest time getting used to. I mean, my home screening was the exact same as last year. I mean, it's great. You don't have to bathe, pajamas. It's all good. So there was no difference on that end this year, but the in-person was a nice way to kind of ease back in that hopefully next year might be a full back in. I guess we'll see, but it's kind of an actual hybrid as opposed to what some other people were doing.
And Victor, what was the experience like for you? Did you do any in person? Were you mostly watching at home?
Yeah, I had a bit of a difficult experience at first trying to book my tickets, and that really threw my schedule out of whack. I was able to go to about one movie a day. That was all I was going to do, trying to avoid crowds. Tried to catch a couple of the must-sees, and everything from a standpoint of watching it at home was really smooth. Just pop on a movie in 2 hour intervals and just kind of burn through them, get some work done, and then hit the sheets and get ready to go to my one screening the next day.
So, Courtney, you talked about the sort of interruptions of having kids and stuff like that. Do you find yourself sort of radically first of all, let's start from the beginning. Do you have a space that you can watch stuff free from distraction? And do you find are you able to recreate a theatrical experience at home?
I will say that yes, I do have a space where I can just sit back and enjoy the films. And I was fortunate enough that when the kids were at school, I had ample time to at least squeeze in usually like 2 films if I could. It's just obviously when they're at home, you know, homework happens, life happens. So I did my best to, you know, have the lights off and try and get that theatrical experience. But it was also weird in the sense that, as you all know, with TIFF, when you're there in person, it's a tiring experience because you're watching a whole amount of films, but you're kind of feeding off the energy of a whole group of other people who are also tired with you. Whereas this year, I didn't have that. So it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, as much as I love it, I'm like, why am I doing this insanity? Why am I seeing this many films? But then you get that one film that you see that you're like, oh, I love cinema again, you know, and it kind of, so I was really relying more on the films to energize me opposed to the atmosphere.
Yeah, it was really interesting for me. I would go to some of the in-person screenings, both press screening and public screenings, and you'd run into a couple people that you would know. You would obviously be as distant as you want, but just for brief moments, again, it was that reminder of how important this festival is for that human connection. Yes, we're watching screenings after screenings after screenings, but look, I know people have gotten married with people that they've met in lines for films. The amount of time I've spent waiting for things is absolutely that time where you find out directly about that buzzworthy film, that thing that you didn't even know that you were supposed to watch. I mean, we obviously are doing that via direct message these days, but there were brief sort of shadows, even within the sort of reserved seating that we had during these screenings, where I actually had, hey man, did you check this out, or did you find out about this stuff? We had like very brief conversations to actually allow us to have that. And Courtney, you're actually absolutely right. It's that human energy I missed. I found this TIFF harder to watch at home than any other TIFF. I think maybe I'm just burnt out from a lot of stuff. But just getting back into it and actually focusing on it, I obviously have a setup that is dedicated for those who are fans of the channel. And even then, I just found my level of concentration just so diminished over the last little while of watching stuff at home, even in the best possible circumstance. And I just never felt that at all in person theatrically. So for me, it really absolutely worked out that way. Pat, did you have a similar sort of sensation, the sort of going back and forth between watching on television, your laptop, and watching on the big screen?
Yeah. So I counted just before we did this, and I did 16 films in the theater. And I found, for one, all the ones that were my favorites were ones I saw in a theater. Mm-hmm. And I can't say if that was necessarily a correlation or just a coincidence. But, you know, I do think I just got more out of it. And I found, you know, like as someone else was saying, like feeding off the energy, I think really helped me appreciate movies like Dune and Official Competition in ways that I would not have had at home. One thing I did find for the hybrid was I do not understand how other press would have been able to cover the festival if you don't have an office downtown. It's like my office is like at Richmond and Peter, so like, you know, a minute away from Scotiabank. So I could easily run, like, watch a movie, go write a review, watch a movie, blah, 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 blah. So I was able to be a bit more efficient, but I did find that, you know, by the time I got home, had trouble getting into the films digitally. And I think it was just also like coming off the high of the theatrical. The movies just had a bit more stacked against them, I think, if I watched them on digital. I don't know, but
I think I can answer one of your sort of rhetorical questions. Is the way that people navigate it is they didn't do it as well as you did, Pat. We simply didn't do as much work as you did. It's as simple as that. The output that you did to this film festival was extraordinary and probably superior to almost anybody who was actually covering TIFF this year, if you take into consideration all the reviews you wrote for POV and the reviews you wrote for here. So I think, frankly, that we just did it by you being better than everybody else. So congratulations.
Thank you. But I do think there's like just a different way of, you know, like, I mean, even in other years, like people could go to like coffee shops or the press office, and you can't do that. So it must be like, I just imagine it was pretty tough for other people to cover the festival.
Especially if they're used to a routine kind of to
Yeah.
pull their stuff together. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a complicated question. If, as you guys might know, New York is actually sort of starting the press screenings this week. It actually starts this weekend. Telluride made decisions, Venice made decisions to basically go in person only. Given everything that's taken place, do you think that enough was in place from when you went to in person, those who did, whether it could have been an all in person festival? Victor, what do you think?
Uh, I think that's a tough one right there. When I went to the press screenings, I definitely felt a lot more comfortable than the public screenings. They're just more spaced out, less people in bigger venues. I don't even know if I'd be comfortable, because when you get in those screenings where there's a person just a seat over on both sides and someone staggered behind you and in front of you, you do start to kind of get a little in your head about, sitting there like breathing in that stale air. I don't think we're at the point where society's like ready to jump in with both feet. I think we got to really like hesitate and slowly ease into it. And depending on how this goes, depending on how New York goes, maybe next year we can aim for that.
And Emma, I know you have specific considerations, but do you think that TIFF would have been a different experience if it was only in person? And would you have participated in nearly the same way?
I probably would have participated in the same way I did this year, which was picking a few key films as opposed to necessarily I wouldn't have necessarily done my normal number of in-person. I was fortunate that the two that I went to were in very large venues so that it didn't feel as close. But there was, and I don't know if other people found this too, there wasn't a regularity to how people were spaced out, which are, I'm sure for various reasons. I think some of it's related to capacity versus the social distancing and how they kind of manage that. And so you never were quite sure what you were walking into though. And I think for some people that would definitely be a consideration, that you can't just know what the spacing issue was going to be each time you're going into. I felt quite comfortable at the two that I went to, but I'm not sure I would do as many in that. So I'm not sure whether anything other than a hybrid would have worked for the majority of people this year. But if they kept similar things and numbers were better, I think I agree with Victor that next year is kind of the aim.
Yeah, and I know you went to the public screenings. At the press and industry screenings, it really was a much more spread out, as packed as it was. It was like one seat, empty seat, one seat, empty seat, or actually a couple seats in between. Courtney, would you have sacrificed not being able to see as many films to have maybe different films that were only available in person?
Probably not. And my main reason for doing virtual this year is because both of my kids are too young to be vaccinated. So it was just one of those where, as much as I love cinema, the stuff that I couldn't see on streaming, I knew were going to come out in the next month or so. I mean, yes, it would have been great to see Dune in the Cinesphere, but I can wait. I can wait a month. So there wasn't anything that was like, oh man, I really got to go in person for me personally, just for my situation.
Right, and again, not to push too hard. First of all, I really appreciate your perspective. It's obviously different. It's very easy for us to sit back in here and say, this is what I would have wanted. I have a suspicion, or at least a feeling, or at least an educated guess, that maybe we would have had more films that are playing those other festivals if it was in person only, or there were more in person. And maybe those films would have been ones that would have forced you to at least make that sort of, I don't want to use Sophie's choice, but I'm going to use Sophie's choice to make that decision about whether or not you need to see it in person versus not seeing it at all.
I would counter that by saying that I think, especially with TIFF the last couple of years, because we've put so much emphasis on the prestige, that just because a film is high profile doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. Like, I think we keep looking at it in the I guess the scope of Oscars and awards, right? So if it's got big name cast, big, I think everyone wants to go see it. Like, I remember, years ago, I think when I first started going, there was a film with Nicole Kidman and I think Anthony Hopkins. I think it was like The Human Strain or something that everyone was buzzing about. Oh, Oscars, and then it premiered and it went flat. Like, you know, we had The Judge a few years ago, like same thing. Like there's a lot of films that sometimes they play well at Venice and then they get here and they flop, or, you know, vice versa. Like what I liked about this year's festival is the films that I loved. There were some that were I expected to like because of the director, but then there was just some stuff that I didn't expect that I would love as much. Like I spent more time watching docs this year, and the doc selection was phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, I even something as subtle as like Petite Maman, which, you know, we know this director, we've seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire, we know she does good stuff, but that thing was like phenomenal. You know, it's just a very simple film where, again, that's not the type of film that's going to be garnering the same buzz as the new Edgar Wright or what have you. So I think we need to get back to a point where we have a balance, where we can appreciate the bigger stuff, you know, the Coen brothers or whatever, whoever's got a big title, but also kind of appreciate some of the smaller films. Whereas I think we've kind of pushed too far into the big name Oscars, People's Choice, and that's where the conversation gets dominated by.
100%. Is a perfect way to wrap it up. The inside baseball section. Let's pivot directly to movies. I will say, as a final point, it's exactly those smaller films that I think we didn't get because of a lack of theatrical. But that's a whole nother conversation. Let's see. We all hope that next year will be in a much better position and that TIFF will sort of reclaim some of its experimentation. Now, Courtney, you talked about docs. I don't want to put you in too much of a conflict of interest here, Pat, but obviously you saw every single doc that was playing except for two, I guess.
Except for two, yeah.
Let's talk about the doc selection this year, which I think is the world premieres that really were world premieres. First of all, they didn't. Most of them didn't get sneak peeks in Telluride, and just what your view of documentary was, and what your view of the theatrical films were this year.
I mean, I thought the doc selection this year was, as Courtney said, outstanding, and I thought it really was such a well curated part of the festival. Like, films really complemented one another in a way that they just, everything else in like special presentations and the galas are just a hodgepodge. And I mean, I think, you know, Tom Powers has proven himself as like probably the most reliable programmer. If you're just going through the book, you know, on a given year, I'll like, you know, 19 out of 20 things he programs, and the one that I don't like, I'll understand completely why it's there. I mean, I think for the docs, it's at such a high bar with Attica on the first night. And, you know, after having just had Stanley Nelson in town for Hot Docs, I think this was probably his best film. Mm-hmm. And it was just such a meticulously researched, powerful look back that really spoke to the times. And then, you know, it played so well with Hold Your Fire, which was a way that, like, if you had just watched Attica, you're like, oh my God, this is going to turn out just the same. Why don't we learn? And, you know, that question is coming out again today. And it was actually, yeah, like the one lineup where there were really heavy hitters in terms of the names. You know, we had Oscar winners like Jimmy Chin and Ty Buster Haley with The Rescue, which, you know, played through the roof. Eva Orner with Burning, which was, I don't usually like the angry, pissed off ego docs, but this one, like, I don't understand how you could watch the movie and not just like want to pull Scott Morrison out of office and I don't know, move to Australia and vote him out. Yeah, like everything was good. And the music doc selection, like listening to Kenny G, when I read the programming notes, I'm like, okay, I'll see it because it's Penny Lane. But that was the most pleasant surprise of the festival. And it was so fun and such an unexpected way of looking at the cheesiest, lamest musician going. And it just, you know, seeing that playing off, you know, the very respectful portraits of Dion Warwick, Oscar Peterson, and Alanis Morissette, I think just really let you show what an exciting voice she is. Yeah, so I mean, the docs overall were just, I thought, phenomenal.
So to your point, so Attica and Hold Your Fire were so extraordinary, but there's one key moment that's the punchline of Attica, and almost a throwaway moment in Hold Your Fire, when they're talking about the Attica event, and they're two different clips. They actually captured two different clips. So in one, you're seeing it from the front. In Attica, you're seeing it from the front. And in Hold Your Fire, you're seeing it from the side. So this is an amazing Rashomon-like moment that you're watching a documentary and suddenly literally have a different perspective, literally see or witnessing history from a slightly different point of view. I thought it was extraordinary. And yeah, my beloved Cinesphere, that glorious geodesic cinematic heavenly orb, to see back to back as a scuba diver the Cousteau doc, and then the very next day to see the rescue, and have an opportunity to actually engage with all these filmmakers was, yeah, absolutely thrilling. I did not see nearly as many docs as I wanted to, but I got a chance to speak with Penny Lane. The interview's up at POV Magazine. And yes, I spent the entire week telling people, go see the Kenny G doc. And they're like, I don't want to see the Kenny G doc. I hate Kenny G. I'm like, that's why you need to see this doc. Because it's literally, that's what it's about. It's us being open to other people's loves, as crazy as that is. We can still say something, we as critics can say something's terrible, but we spend less time than most people spend not enough time thinking empathetically about somebody we violently disagree with and their point of view. And I think that the film does a really sort of extraordinary job of that, while still allowing us to understand that Kenny G is super complicated.
Yeah.
Problematic is one word. Whatever it is, it's all there, and it's all in this film. It's really quite extraordinary. Victor, oh, go on, Pat. Sorry.
Oh, for the documentary front, I do also have to give a shout out to Flea, because that was my favorite film of Sundance, and I think it really held up for me as the movie of the year.
There you go. You watched it again.
I watched it again, and I got to speak to the director. I mean, he was, I think, doing his dishes in the kitchen in Denmark. But, yeah, I mean, I do think they really, even though there weren't as many world premieres in the festival, I think there was still just a real banner crop of movies that a lot of people probably got to see, that sometimes skip TIFF because they're often so premiere status conscious. So I think there were trade-offs, and I got to see Flea again, so whatever.
Victor, if you could talk about your let's just stick with docs now. If there was a couple of standouts for you.
I didn't see nearly as many docs. I only caught a handful, but a couple really impressed me. First off, there's Julia, the Julia Child doc.
Yeah.
That's not something I wanted to see, much like the Kenny G doc. And I just had a couple hours to kill. It was available on the platform, so I threw it on. It really blew me away. I enjoyed every minute of it. It's a story about a woman, finding her calling so late in life, and what it means to chase your bliss and just find the things that make you happy. Food almost takes a back seat to just her philosophy in life and touching the people around her. So I really enjoyed that. And the other one was the Dion Warwick documentary. Saw that in the theater, was not expecting to have the reaction I had. I think I teared up 3 times watching that. So I think it was just a combination of, she sings a couple of my favorite songs of all time. I'm sitting in the theater again. It's been so long since I've been in a theater with people, and seeing this beautiful Black woman, this legend up there, and it hit me so hard that I went home, and then I watched it immediately after on the platform. I had other things to do, but I just had to see it a second time. So they definitely left a big impression.
There's 2 rules basically in music docs. If you're going to have it, have either Questlove or Snoop Dogg just show up, and they will be the star of your doc immediately. I did not love that doc. I thought it was a little too hagiographic or hagiographic, whatever the word is. But that 4-minute sequence where Snoop Dogg talks about being schooled by her is one of the greatest nonfiction moments of the year. It's truly extraordinary. And I love that. And the Julia Child, also super interesting. Lots of beautiful food porn. It's definitely there, but absolutely taking a story which seems very straightforward and gives it a little hook. Emma, is there anything sort of on the documentary front that you managed to catch and speak to?
Yeah, I saw I think 3 docs or 4. I saw a lot fewer movies than most of you this year, but I have to agree with Pat talking about burning, that normally that kind of angry doc can kind of alienate, but in this case I was feeling the let me book a flight down to Australia and see what I can do about their current prime minister. So I found that one really affecting. I saw The Rescue, and then I saw the Becoming Cousteau doc as well. So it ended up being a bit of a climate change unintentionally, but I'm really glad I did, because it's such an important thing at the moment that it felt kind of a good topic to kind of unintentionally get immersed in. And I thought actually all 3 of them were near the top of my my picks for the whole festival in terms of recommending them, especially as well. But also really happy to see female documentary filmmakers really representing this festival as well. That was really
Well,
fun.
I mean, for years now, some of the greatest documentarians,
Yeah.
when we talk about the sort of gulf between male and female directors, persons of color, different communities, nonfiction has really been at the forefront of all that.
Yeah.
That gets lost sometimes in the conversation about
Yes.
who's making what. And if you open it up to who the producers are,
Yeah, then
the list is incredible. The people actually bring these films to life. Victor, you brought up something. Again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds again, but you brought up something which is critically important for me in all film festivals, which is the accidental discovery, because I have a window of time to kill.
Yeah.
This is for me fundamental to experiencing a film festival. Once you've committed, once you're like, I'm here, and you got to film at this time, and you got to film at this time, and something is playing here, go in and give it a shot. And I have to say, that is one amazing experience about the digital, is that you can just sort of pick and choose what you want. I'm the lunatic who doesn't stop films. This year, due to lots of circumstances, there was a couple I didn't actually go through, Burning Weirdly one of them. But for me, that sense of just give me a film. I don't even want to know what it's about. Just let me see something. That's how I've seen some of my favorite films of all time. Not just good festival films. That's how I saw Rushmore. I went into Rushmore by Wes Anderson randomly because it was just playing. That's how I saw Son of Saul. So that sense of discovery, I really encourage anybody watching to, when you're at a festival, just dive in, and especially if you have the ability to access this stuff, an open pass. Toronto doesn't necessarily work that way, but lots of other festivals just basically give you access. If you have that, just take a chance on something like a Kenny G doc that you think you're not really going to respond to, and definitely take a chance on it. Now, go on.
Sorry, I was
Emma.
just gonna say that's one thing that, having worked both sides of the festival, both the public side and the press side, that is one thing that you really regret, not with no pass system like that, really missing out on when you do have those gaps and you're like, I don't want to spend another $26 when I've already spent a fortune, but I would really like to see this. That's something, that I miss about the press, and it's a big plus when you have all of those kind of at your disposal to be able to fill them out, whether it's an in-person press screening or on the digital platform now. It's such a great opportunity.
Also, let's not forget, we work very hard, and we've worked very hard to get in the position to be able to attend the festival in this perspective. I am not sort of here with false humility. That being said, I certainly recognize that our experience when we attend these festivals is fundamentally different than most public. So it's always good to keep that in mind. You have a lot of press. You saw that now. A lot of Americans were just complaining that they couldn't see XYZ film, and of course, or XYZ film in their perspective. And for us, we were blocked out of a bunch of Canadian films. Don't get me started on being able to get a Vimeo for a film, which is a Canadian film, from my American editor so that I could cover for an American publication that was flat out told there was no link available. Not only was a link available, it was bloody Vimeo. So it just shows the sort of what we have to do, the navigation. Now we got Courtney coming back and forth. I hope everything's okay with him. But let's navigate to another segment, which is Midnight Madness. This is something that traditionally I would never go to press screenings for Midnight Madness. I tried, I guess it was Six String Samurai, if I recall, was the first Midnight Madness press screening I went to. And I was there and everybody was hating the movie and I could feel the hatred. I'm like, this is garbage. 50% of a Midnight Madness film movie is that feeling of the community, of doing that. That being said, so much of what Peter Kaplowski is now programming for Midnight Madness really, for me, are sort of vanguard films that really do work better when you're not exhausted and not having a whole bunch of people hooping and hollering. And that's why one of the films I love the most, I think is a fantastic film. It's certainly for a Midnight Madness genre, but it may not be for everybody. And Courtney, I know you love this film as well. If you could talk about our shared love of a certain African gangster film.
Are you talking the saloon? I'm
talking it.
Yes, it's and I apologize, my internet's been acting up of late, but that film's phenomenal. Your children. No, there can't blame them on this one. That film is, you guys were talking about films that kind of just fit in your schedule, and that was
We're
one
talking about
that,
films that fit on the schedule, but also the Midnight Madness. Some of the Midnight Madness films that maybe in the past we would be upset of not seeing with an audience, but then you see a film that's so amazing. I'm just happy I saw it when I wasn't tired at all, because the film is amazing, not depending on genre stuff to jolt you. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film.
yeah, exactly. And this was one that it literally fit in my schedule. And I heard a little bit of buzz again through the DMs. You know, a friend of mine said that you should really check this one out. She absolutely loved it, and I was blown away by it. It's a film that starts off as a really cool Western. You know, you're following these three mercenaries as they're trying to smuggle this guy out of the country, and then it starts to turn into a bit of a political drama, talking about stuff in the past and, you know, different forms of abuse that kind of linger with you. Then it turns into a horror film, and all of it is awesome. It is one of those, I haven't stopped thinking about it since the festival's ended. Like I'm waiting to see that again, either in theaters or, you know, it's one that I already automatically knew that that's going to be added to the Blu-ray collection, because I'm just going to pop that one in and replay it over and over, because there's just so much to explore. And again, it's one of the great discoveries of TIFF for me, right? So it was my favorite of the few Midnight Madness ones that I did see on the platform.
And to that point, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I was speaking with Peter and about how excited I was and how much I hated Dashcam. And I love that. I love that he programs stuff. I understand absolutely why he programmed Dashcam. He's got to understand why I violently hate it and think it should be destroyed. Both of those things can happen. And he's like, oh, well, you know, it's because people didn't like the central character. It's like, no, because it made me literally physically ill to watch Shaky Cam. And I just didn't think it was interesting. Titan, which is also a horrible sociopathic monster, is a very interesting and fun and engaging film. But regarding when he accepted this, the filmmaker was like, we didn't think you were gonna say yes, and they had 3 months to finish the film, and it looks phenomenal. And so it's one of those things that absolutely, I think you're right, that it feels like it's the kind of thing that you sort of go through all the weeds, not the Oscar stuff, not the things, but find that movie that years from now you're going to be talking about when you find The Raid, or you find, I mean, even Saw, when we saw that at Midnight Madness, you're like, oh, this might actually become something. So there's been some extraordinary things. Victor, did you see any of the Midnight stuff, or do you see other films that you think should have played Midnight but didn't necessarily make it into that slate?
I'm the Midnight Madness guy, so I had Saloon circled on my calendar. I was there for a 9:30 a.m. press screening. I was counting down the minutes, saw it, loved it, went home, and then waited for it to come back on Friday and watched it again. So,
dude, you win.
Yeah, it's definitely like that. That's the peak of the festival for me. Like you said, the other movies just weren't up to that standard. Dashcam, like, I love found footage movies, but 9 out of 10 just hit me like a kick in the nuts. And you have to just get through the worst movies to get like one jewel. And Dashcam had a few really compelling moments, but overall it was just obnoxious. And it had nothing to do with the terrible main character. It was just physically hard to watch. I was watching on like a 60-inch screen in the dark. I had to get up and turn the lights on because it was just physically making me nauseous. And I'm a video gamer, so like nothing really rattles my belly. So that speaks volumes about that. But Saloon was head and shoulders above everything else. Nothing even came close.
Which is saying something, since one of them won the Palme d'Or. I'm very curious about those who saw Titan, what your reaction was to it. Because my feeling when I saw it in France was, this is really good. It was like the 10th best film I saw, maybe 15th best film. And I love its allusions to Cronenberg. But for me, it wasn't such a home run. And I was worried that it winning the Palme d'Or would take away from the film in a funny way. For me, I was saying it would be the best Toronto After Dark film you've ever seen, a pretty damn good Fantasia film, the 3rd or 4th best Midnight Madness film, and this is winning Palme. God bless the celebration of the director. I think she's great. God bless it playing in Toronto, the home of Cronenberg. But for me, it just didn't reach the level of, that we sort of pedestalize some of the films that won Palme d'Or. But I'm curious what you thought. Emma, did you get a chance to see Titan?
No, I haven't. No, it's one of the ones I did not get to. It is on my list it is one of those films where I feel like I should watch it just for the sake of watching it. But when I had a limited, wallet full, it was like, it didn't make the cut. It just, no.
But lower your expectations.
Yeah,
and you
okay,
might
fair
get
enough.
more of it.
I'll note that.
There you go. Courtney, did you get a chance to see it? Oh, Courtney, I think barfed again. Pat, your thoughts at Titan?
Yeah, so I did see it, and I would agree that I I don't think it benefited from the expectations set by a Palme d'Or winner. I really loved the idea of the movie. Um, the first the first half of the film I thought was wild, and I was really into it. And I would say that for me was on the level of a Palme d'Or winner because it just had such an authentic voice and style, and it committed to it, and it did so much stuff that I had never really seen before in a movie with like gender bending horror. She screws a car, gets pregnant. The whole thing with a dipstick was just twisted. And then the minute the Vincent Landon character comes in, it lost me. I thought it just became a different movie. It didn't really work. I randomly didn't buy their relationship as much as I believed the idea that she would fuck a car. So I mean, I would recommend it to people, but I would say, it's not Parasite for a Palme winner.
And for me, I mentioned this before. For me, the second half is actually better than the first half. The first
which
half
is interesting, but
yeah, and I'll say this. I just want to get this sort of on record too. I think I really, really, really would have loved it if I saw it when I was 20 and hadn't seen a ton of films. And it's really easy, again, if we talk about this easy to forget the public thing, it's really easy to forget that the things we saw and we loved when we were much younger, we hadn't got all the references that we're checking off. I have said repeatedly, thank God I saw Reservoir Dogs before I'd ever seen a Ringo Lamb film. So I was able to just absolutely fall in love with it and not be cynical. When I saw Crash, I had never seen a Buñuel film. David Cronenberg's Crash. Like, I'd never seen what he's drawing from. And so when I'm seeing this, I'm almost forcing myself to applaud the references rather than become cynical about like, oh, like you love this thing, I love this thing, let's love this thing together. Let's not be so jaded about it. So in a funny way, when it becomes a relationship movie, for me that's the difference between it being a Videodrome and it suddenly being Eastern Promises. Right? And in many ways I like Eastern Promises more than I like a Videodrome. I like the Cronenberg after Cronenberg stops being the person that people thought Cronenberg was. And so for me, it also showed Ducournau capable of making films not just to shock, but to actually move. And if it worked or didn't work, it certainly showed that to the point. And Courtney mentioned it very, very briefly. But Petit Maman, as crazy it is, I saw Celine Sciamma's films before Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And so when Portrait hit, I'm like, where the hell has this person been? Because her earlier films I just find insular and just dreary and the kind of sort of nonsensical stuff that plays festivals and just do not speak to me at all. And then when I heard about Petit Maman, this film is going to be about these little girls, and I'm like, ugh, why do I need to see this? It's amazing. And it is such incredible assured direction. And if you add Paris 13 District, which was supposed to play TIFF and got pulled because it wasn't allowed to have a theatrical position, she wrote that, co-wrote that. She has firmly established herself with this second film for me as like, I will watch anything this woman does. Like, I don't care. I will watch it. I may not love it, but the fact that she's so elegantly, we're talking about Petit Maman, Courtney, she's so elegantly in this tiny film did it. And in a funny way, it could have been a Midnight Madness film. Probably not. It's not certainly gooey or genre enough, but it has enough of a semi-sci-fi hook that I could see it playing to that kind of audience in a sort of more respectable way. Anybody else want to talk about any of the Midnight Madness-y stuff? Or 1 Second, maybe you guys saw, which again, Jean Nimou, absolutely somebody who has played genre films in the festival.
So I kind of want to pick up on something you mentioned with Vanguard, was I feel like the festival really is missing something without that program.
Yes.
Let's talk about what Vanguard was for those that might not know it.
So Vanguard was kind of the like embrace the strange, weird art house avant-garde stuff. It was usually more speculative and horror in nature, but sometimes like very sexy, like, you know, edgier stuff that didn't really fit anywhere else, but it was always going to bring something you hadn't seen before. And I feel like without having that go-to guide, I missed that. Even though like I was never the big Vanguard fan, but I always tried to kind of sample it. And really, I think the films benefited from the frame of reference you got just by knowing that you were going to have to work a bit harder to go with the films. And I thought actually 2 films in the platform program seemed like, you know, perfect Vanguard titles. And one was Earwig, which I thought was just a slog. And I felt like it was in the competition just because they didn't know where else to put it. You know, it was just such a strange thing where it was like too slow for Midnight Madness, too narrative driven for Wavelengths, but, you know, beautifully shot, interesting concept. It was like pulling teeth. And then I like Good Madam, Malungu Wam, the Jenna Bass film, I thought would have been a perfect Vanguard because it was, you know, doing something interesting with horror, but also, you know, much slower, more atmospheric. And I think that would have been a perfect fit for that crowd. So
I've sarcastically referred to Vanguard as Midnight Madness for adults, but what I mean for that isn't just the you grow up and grow out of Midnight Madness. No, it's the 10 o'clock film, not the midnight film.
Right.
It's the film, and
Right.
Cold Fish was always my definitive. Cold Fish is what, 2 hour 45 minutes, and for 2 hours is this really sort of tense film, and then the craziness happens. So you need to have the stomach for the craziness, but actually allows. I think Parasite would have been a miserable Midnight Madness film and a perfect Vanguard film.
I definitely find
Again,
myself
speaking to that.
during the programs as I watch them going, that would have been a Vanguard film.
Yeah.
That would have been a Vanguard film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not a wavelengths guy at the best of times. So I would much rather them have kept Vanguard, made it much tighter and defined it as that, as the you have a film which is artsy and genre, whatever that's going to be. And then if you want to show Memoria, throw that into Vanguard, right? It doesn't need to have this segregated, we're going to do stuff that's so crazily experimental. Victor, was there anything sort of on the broad spectrum of this that maybe wasn't in the midnight form, but that you responded to? I don't know if you saw Endeavor, for example, but some of the other films that might have spoken to you that might have previously been in showcase like Vanguard?
There was a film I caught. It was like the last day of TIFF and it was still on the platform and I didn't want it to be over. So I just threw it on. It was called Are You Lonesome Tonight? And it just starts off as like this beautifully shot, this gorgeous, just a navel-gazing indie drama. You don't think it's going anywhere. And then it just starts building up. And by the end, it becomes this pulpy, bloody, almost Coen-esque crime thriller. And I just thought like, wow, like what a ride that was. I think you could have easily fit it into that program.
Courtney, any thoughts?
Not for anything that would have been in Midnight Madness, but when you guys were talking about Vanguard, I was thinking of I don't know if you guys saw Out of Sync.
No.
That was a really interesting film. It's basically about this film sound editor whose hearing basically goes out of sync. So she starts to hear things like a minute and 45 seconds after it's happened. And as the film progresses, she gets further out of sync, and then certain things are revealed and the whole hearing thing changes. And it was just a really interesting film. I don't think it completely works, but I was really happy I saw it. And it was one of those that I thought would have been like a Vanguard title back in the day.
It doesn't completely work, but I'm really happy I saw it. We should get on T-shirts. Like that's that's your dream. That's a really eloquent way of putting it. I don't know. Did you guys check out I'm Your Man? Did you guys get to see it?
I really liked that. Yeah.
Oh my god!
I'm
so
really annoyed I didn't put it.
Oh
I
my
had it
God,
on my
yeah,
list
totally.
and I took it off my list, and now I'm annoyed.
I usually make a point of trying to see as many of the best foreign language film submissions as I can. And they're all like coming in pretty late this year. And that was the perfect example of something I just fit in a slot because I was going to bed and checked the Twitter feed and Germany had submitted it. And it expired in the morning. So I just watched it before bed. And it
this
was
is
so much
that's a
fun.
classic experience
Yeah.
of where I know nothing about it. I'm just going to watch it, and I'm not seeing whether it's Oscar submission, so that I'm not going in with that baggage. We all watch films differently. This is absolutely no disrespect, but
It
yeah,
was an
Dan
odd
Stevens as a
choice.
beautiful robot. You totally believe that Dan Stevens is another species. Like you
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I would hire him for sure.
He's incredibly engaging, and Pat, you'll know the actress's name. She's terrific as well. Um,
It's
not
I'm
to put
drawing
you
a
on
blank, but yes, thank you
yeah.
for putting me on the spot.
No,
It's
I
not the
apologize. I
oh,
just know your brain works much better than me over this.
okay. 'Cause
She's
my
great.
brother, like, are you talking about Tony Erdmann?
I hate Tony Erdmann, and this is the whole funny part, is that I
'Cause-
despise Tony Erdmann, and I was the lunatic who was jumping up and down about how much I hated it, and so I love this film despite all of this, right? I'm like, oh my god, am I going to get this again? And I was like, oh no, this is fabulous. I really, really love this.
Yeah, because Sandra Hüller was great in this. I wasn't familiar with the lead actress though. I know I've
Right.
seen her in things, but not to name her.
Exactly.
That one's
go
really
on.
interesting. I was just going to say that one's really interesting too if you weren't aware that Dan Stevens makes German movies, because this is not his first. He's
I
made
actually didn't know
others.
that.
Yeah, he's made at least one other in the past, because he's fluent. But it was a biopic about a singer with Heike. I never remember how to say him. The sexy girl from Love Actually, whose name I can never remember.
Perfect.
Yes, who is German, but I recommend seeking that one out because it was actually really good.
Do we
too.
know why he speaks German?
College credit.
Yeah, I think it was just a school. Yep. Yeah, language credits. I
Yeah.
think that just
Amazing.
went well in terms of career moments.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it's a
International.
Jodie Foster thing that somehow he went to some beautiful private school in the middle of some Prussian countryside, because that certainly seems like a Dan Stevens movie. And if people have not seen The Guest, which, if I'm not crazy, played Midnight Madness, totally incredible performance. My first introduction to him. I know that many people know him from a lot of other stuff, but he's always that guy in The Guest. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Because he's incredible of doing exactly what he needs to do within in that context. Okay, so we've talked about some of the things we love. Let's talk about the big films. Let's talk about the films that are probably going to do very, very well. And part of that, we will talk about the Canadian films, of course, but now let's just talk about Belfast, the film that won the People's Choice Award. Kenneth Branagh's film, ostensibly about his childhood. It's really hard not to see echoes to something like Roma, another People's Choice winner. I thought the performances were great. It's very sweet. I think it's incredibly accessible, but still has a level of darkness. And that's a really fine line to do. I think people, once they see it, are going to be very negative about it, thinking it doesn't go far enough. And I have to remind that in a world where most people are just watching Marvel and blockbuster stuff, this might be their only quote-unquote art film they watch all year, and I think it's a perfectly wonderful one for them to fall in love with. But I want to hear what you guys thought about Belfast. Feel free to jump in.
I didn't see it.
Okay. I would say that Jude Hill, the little boy, is he just lights that screen up, and what a discovery I think he probably is overall. I agree, that it's very accessible. It was a little too light for me, but I still found myself loving it. And I have family, I'm Irish, so there's got that little, I saw it with my mom, she cried multiple times. So I think she's less of a festival audience than I am. So I think she gave me a hint of what kind of the movie-going audience outside of film festivals will probably think of it. And I'm kind of just happy to see Kenneth Branagh doing something that has a connection with him that actually seems to work, because I think he's an excellent director who hasn't made a lot of really great choices.
He's an excellent director who's made some terrible directing decisions.
Exactly.
Maybe bought him another house, but for me, it was, you're right. I mean, something as obnoxious and ostentatious as Hamlet, you kind of loved the crazy hubris of it all.
Yeah.
And since then, he's been doing just direct on the directorial front. I love when he shows up in Christopher Nolan films. Don't get me wrong.
I think he's a great actor.
Amazing.
Yeah, I actually, I wish his decisions about his directing were as good as his sometimes what he picks to show up in. Yeah.
Courtney and Victor, did you guys get a chance to see it?
Didn't catch it.
Haha, there we go. So once again, and this for years, I knew that a film would win the People's Choice Award because I didn't see it. For years, it was like, here's people are talking about. I'm like, what? I mean, films like Tsotsi and Whale Rider used to win People's Choice, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. One
if
thing I would add for the hybrid festival was I was really frustrated that for the films that were only in theater, like Belfast, like if you saw something at the same time, you're just out of like.
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah. Belfast was digital, but not for press.
Yes, not for press. Because I saw it digitally. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, it's like every other year, there's always the, oh, you know, like we're comparing notes the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I'm running back to see like the encore PNI screening of that. And you couldn't do that this year, which I think was too bad.
Did you guys get to see Last Night in Soho?
Yeah.
Victor, what'd you think?
I had a blast. It was probably the most fun I had in a theater. I saw it in Roy Thompson Hall. As soon as you walk in, they have the lights down low. There's this purple, moody lighting. You feel like you're walking into a Giallo movie. And the lights went down. My heart started beating really fast, and it was just everything I wanted it to be. It was beautiful, gorgeous production design, gorgeous sets. Intentionally campy performances. It was just so much fun. I wish I had seen it with a crowd that wasn't PNI, but that's just a minor nitpick.
Yeah, it's a wild film, that's to be sure. I also saw it at the Press and Industry screening. There's two films, we'll talk about the other one in a sec, but it's a film where I was slightly trepidatious as it was unfolding. I thought that it would get too in the weeds with some of his genre elements, but then I sat back and just enjoyed it. I just enjoyed that he's having fun telling this and just absolutely echoing Repulsion, among many other things. It's a very, very Polanskian film, which is really interesting given that filmography. But more importantly, the way that he elicits these performances and the integration of the soundtrack is outrageously great. So I totally dug it. I saw it actually in Lightbox 3, so the mood was much less interesting than what you had. But in terms of a film where I cared less about where the story was going and just loved the sort of character moments and the style moments and the look of it all, we got to talk about Dune. So, Courtney, I guess you did not have a chance to go to Dune because it was in person. Emma, you did not see it as well. But Pat, I know you saw Dune and I know you really responded to it. If you could talk about the experience of seeing it.
Sure. And sorry, I had to jump out for a sec because my cat was meowing at the door. So
of course.
Oh yeah, Dune. I had high expectations, but mixed expectations because I've read the book and I've seen the David Lynch film, and I think they're both terrible. So I really came to this as a Denis Villeneuve fan, and I was just, you know, in it 100% from the opening shot, and I thought it was the most exciting, like propulsive, nonstop action as like Mad Max Fury Road, or since Mad Max Fury Road, really. And I thought just was such a good exercise in world building and such imagination. Like I felt like, you know, it's like, oh, this must have been what it was like to be in the 70s and see like Star Wars for the first time. Just that like epic scale and vision. But I think what I really liked about Dune most of all was I forgot how much I loved seeing a movie in the theater.
Right.
And I thought that really hit home that like you could not get the same experience for that movie on digital. Yeah. So yeah, it reminded me why I love movies. Like I don't think I can give a film a better compliment than that. So
my great failure this festival, if it can be said a great failure, is I tried every favor I could to see it in Cinesphere. I saw it in Limax, and giving nothing away, in Limax, obviously there's a bunch of aspect ratio changes from the 2:3:5 to normal IMAX ratio, which is 1:4:3 to 1. The nerds will know what I'm talking about. But basically you're going from a rectangle to a giant square. And when that moment is happening on a Limax, it's basically your big sort of regular 69 screen, like the same shape as your television. So it's kind of going boop, boop, and I'm like, yeah. Oh my god, I am missing that moment of everything opening up and exploding. Victor, you did have a chance to see it?
No.
Okay, so the two of us are gushing. all we can say is whatever happens, try to see this film on a real IMAX screen. It really is quite stunning. And look, I liked it a lot. Pat liked it even more than me. I can absolutely see people being super jaded about it. I can see people being super jaded about Soho. But those were two films that I'm just glad that they played the festival, and I'm glad we actually had a chance to see. Let's sort of go way the other way. Another film that was one of the People's Choice contenders that we sort of skipped over, Power of the Dog and Scarborough. Let's talk about those two, but let's start with Power of the Dog. Emma, I know you got a chance to see it. Let's talk about, as our resident Cumberbatchian, I'm just wondering if you can sort of deconstruct what you thought about this particular film and how you actually saw it.
Also a major Jane Campion fan, but that was my first in-person screening at TIFF. So that was also getting used to everything at the same time, and also very close. And I don't normally sit very close. And that was actually, I think, normally might have been a negative, but in this case, it was a good place to be immersed in the setting of that film and the way Campion chooses her shots so precisely and carefully. It was actually, I felt like I was in Montana, which is where it's set.
And you can see why lunatics like me always sit closer.
I do, for especially for films like this, made total sense for me. And I've also read the book by Thomas Savage, so I had expectations, and they were pretty high, and they were met, which I was very pleased with. I thought everybody, I'm the first to say I'm not always a Kirsten Dunst fan, but I thought she hit it out of the park. I thought she did an amazing job. Cody Smith-McPhee, Jesse Plemons, and Cumberbatch playing, to most people, against type. I've also been on record that I don't always love his American accent, but I think he's finally landed somewhere where I wasn't thinking about it at all. It didn't take me out of the film. And so that made me very happy as well.
I like his American accent more than I like him constantly playing characters that have some form of spectral issue, some issue that falls on the spectrum.
Well, and that was one of the things I loved about this one, is that it gives people a chance to see the range, that it's not that he doesn't play other characters, but the ones that get the press time and the kind of big headlines are those characters that are the Sherlockian type characters. And
he's either in a comic book movie or he's doing that sort of weird, quirky, otter-like man. And this, you actually felt a sense of menace, but also a sense of sadness. Absolutely.
Yeah, there was the Phil. If you have a chance to read the book, I really recommend it, because the layers of Phil, his character Phil Burbank, are really worth delving into. And I think both he and Jane together did an amazing job of pulling that to the screen.
So I loved Jesse Plemons in this film. He sort of disappears for a little bit, but I just loved his quietness. And then and I spent much of the film thinking, man, he really has taken over a certain subset of this kind of character actor. Just absolutely tremendous. Campion, again, incredibly strong director, elicits really beautiful moods. But I spent the whole time thinking, man, this is beautifully reminding me of There Will Be Blood. Oblivious to the fact that Johnny Greenwood did the soundtrack, completely unaware. Equally unaware that Jesse Plemons' character was meant to be played by Paul Dano, who stepped out of the project. So it would have been like, what the hell's going on here? So it's all good.
Kirsten Dunst was originally going to be Elizabeth Moss, I believe, too. That the scheduling got moved around and everybody shifted. But
there you go. Did anybody else got to see Power of the Dog?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, everybody.
Okay, what did you guys think?
I loved it. I thought it was great, pretty much for everything that you guys said. I thought Plemons was great as well, and I don't think he's getting enough praise right now. And obviously, his performance isn't as showy as the others, but I thought he did great. And I guess it was those two films where the Montana landscape was just really
Montana Story.
Yeah, Montana Story as well.
One was shot in Montana, the other one was in Australia.
New Zealand.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, it was overall. I absolutely loved it. And it was one where, similar to you, Jason, throughout it, I was thinking of different films. There were certain shots where I was thinking of The Searchers. Obviously, There Will Be Blood. There's another film that I won't mention because it might spoil some stuff. But even though my mind was kind of drifting to all these other films, it still felt unique on its own. So I quite enjoyed it.
I'm not going to mention a film. I don't know if it's the same one we're thinking of, but there's a lot of Hitchcock here. And I was very surprised to see that. There's like, it's really wild to see a Western that has this undercurrent of Hitchcock. And I really haven't seen that. There Will Be Blood weirdly doesn't have it, but No Country for Old Men, which was shot in the same West Texas area, has that. So again, I think all of these sort of neo-Westerns, in this case it's not really neo-Western, but you know what I mean, a contemporary Western is drawing out all these elements, and I really liked it. Certainly wasn't my favorite of the fest, but I love that people are really, really responding to it. Victor, what did you think?
You guys pretty much said it all. I will be a bit of a contrarian, though. I'm someone who loves Midnight Madness movies, so I know how to suspend my disbelief, but I cannot get past Cumberbatch's accent. Like, it's just a barrier to me. Like, I can't do it. His American accent, it takes me out of the film. So I loved everything else, and I was lukewarm on that.
Can we talk about the biggest suspension of disbelief in the entire festival? Sorry, Courtney, you keep coming back and forth. We'll get his view. Did you guys see Dear Evan Hansen?
Yes.
What did you think, Pat?
I liked it. I mean, I think on one hand, I went in with the expectations that it was a TIFF opener. And it was much better than, like The Judge or whatever. I did think that the 27-year-old playing Ben Platt is an old 27. That's one thing I'll say. Like, he looks like he's 40. So I think, they could have cast someone else or set it in a university or, tried like The Irishman in reverse. For me, that was really the one drawback about the film. And I found I did kind of have to keep reminding myself to not look. But I quite enjoyed the film. I thought it had such a good message about mental illness or mental health, and having conversations, to give people reassurance and guidance and let them know they're not alone. I thought some of the songs were just wonderful, and I don't know, it was just such a good mood builder for the festival, I thought. I'm clearly in the minority. But
no, look,
I liked it.
I got quoted in newspaper articles because I thought it was good, right?
Yeah,
that I didn't think. And to your point, I think that the narrative wouldn't have worked in university because he has to be 17 or 16, 17-ish, to be making such a terrible decision, to be locked in that position, to be so uncomfortable that he does it. If he's what we consider to be like a full adult, a voting adult, over drinking age, etc., we can't forgive what he does. But it's not a matter of forgiving. We can't even empathize because clearly he shouldn't be that kind of be that level of sociopathy. What was fascinating to me was in the reaction to this is that the fundamental thing that the musical and the film draws out is that people have these knee-jerk reactions. They glom onto certain things. They celebrate certain key moments and make themselves elevated by coming in after the fact and sort of saying, this is what I think and I'm this. And the number of people out there that saw the musical, loved the musical, and then realized when they saw the film, oh my God, this character is slightly more complex than I might have realized when I saw it in the stage show. And rather than owning that, suddenly just slamming this film. Or the number of people internationally that are slamming it for reasons that, sure, he doesn't look 27. She doesn't look 24. She looks younger, he looks older, whatever. They also burst into the song. That's just one of those things that we're going to accept. They all look 30 years younger than they do in Greece, and we just simply accept that. So look, I am in a weird position of defending something that I think is at best okay. I think musically it's incredible, and I think casting somebody else, you would have gotten a voice as strong as his, and on a straight up musical level, he's killing it. Musically, he's singing the hell out of this part. It's directed well. Most of it is not done to track, so it's him singing live as part of the performance. On that level, divorced from it all, I think it's actually quite extraordinary. And yeah, I found it pretty amazing to have this just showering of shame on this film from A whole bunch of people that hadn't seen it, and B, now that people are seeing it, they're just jumping aboard because it's really cool to slam this one movie. You have many, many other films that are much more worthy of your derision than this one.
I did find the reaction very strange, especially like, I mean, I haven't seen the stage musical, but the story is the same. And I don't really
The story is better in the movie. The songs they got rid of are better now that they've made the film. They've introduced a new song, which is better. Like all of this stuff. And Courtney, we're talking about our friend, dear Evan Hansen, which you did or did not see?
I actually just saw last night.
And what did you think? What is your reaction to it? Oh. That's a very long drawn out.
I feel like that says it right there.
Your internet's a little barfy, my friend. We lost him again. Well, we'll come back to the year of Evan Hansen. We'll get Courtney to actually write something. Oh, this is perfect. This is a perfect reaction to Evan Hansen.
On stage. I don't think it. Yeah, I don't think it works as a movie that well.
There you go. Okay, perfect. We're getting sort of every other word, my friend. So we'll go from there. Okay, so enough about Evan Hansen. Enough about this.
My internet has been atrocious tonight.
Yeah, it's all good. We should talk about Scarborough very briefly, and then we'll sort of wrap up with a couple other films. We'll do sort of a thing. I think Victor wants to talk about Scarborough. Let's talk about Scarberia, man.
You got to let me go first because I'm probably the only one without a nice thing to say about it. It was my least favorite film of the festival.
Amazing.
I had a hard time watching it. I thought it was poverty porn, trauma porn. I thought every bad character was just simply the worst person in the world with no nuance. I was literally like face palming and just saying, when will this be over? I don't know why everyone loved it.
There you go. Excellent, bold, contrarian position. Was there a Canadian film that you did love? Did you love, for example, Night Raiders?
Yes, I really enjoyed Night Raiders. It was smart. It was nuanced. It told an epic story, but on a small scale. It was everything that Scarborough was not.
Was there any other films from our country that you really responded to?
Oh, I would say Drunken Birds was really good. And I think one that, I don't know, I think got kind of lost. Like I saw it in a theater in Scotiabank 12, and I think there were 6 people. So that was interesting.
And for those that don't know, Scotiabank 12 is the IMAX screen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge theater and looked amazing on the big screen. So it's a Mexican-Canadian co-production by some of the team that did Roma on the Mexican side, and the lead actor was in Roma. He's the guy who does the martial arts baton twirl naked, and he just gives a fantastic performance as Willie, a guy who works for the Mexican drug cartel and is on the run, and he gets a job as a migrant worker in a Quebec farm, and it's just such an interesting portrait of like the hidden lives in Canada, and the terrible people who, take advantage of them because, they're like, oh, I pay you, I own you, whatever. And the family is just so messed up, but it's a really effective sort of film that straddles like crime drama. I think it spins the usual migration encounter story on its head. It was really exciting, I thought. Like far and away best Canadian movie. Oh, Saint Anne too, in the wavelengths, was just a really authentic voice. More of a challenge, but very good.
Yeah, Drunken Birds was one of those that I had it paused, and I was about to play it right after it expired, and my browser refreshed, and then I was locked out, so I didn't get to see it. One of those, the joys of that. But back to Scarborough, because it was the runner-up for the People's Choice. We got Victor's position. Did anybody else get a chance to see it?
Yeah, I saw it. I really liked it. I'd read the book, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. I'm a fan of the directors, so maybe that I went in, I don't know. I thought performance-wise, like the work they get out of these kids is just so moving. And I think it really invites a lot of important conversations. And I think, it makes you look at frontline workers, teachers, just in different ways. I thought it was very impressive.
And Courtney, what did you think?
I absolutely loved it. I didn't think it was trauma porn at all. It was, what I liked about it was that for me, the characters and the situations felt real, and similar to what Pat was just saying, the education system and the way how we put money into a lot of these community-based programs, but not in ways that actually help the community, spoke volumes in this film. I don't know, I really connected with this film. I really loved it. I love the performances. And I don't know, there's something about how this film keeps everything grounded. Like, I think of something like Florida Project or other films where you're dealing with children in poverty. There's always a fantastical element to it. The kids escape through some fantasy world or through some type of play, where these kids don't have that. You know, they're forced to see the day-to-day, and they're supposed to, they have to deal with certain hardships that come and deal with grief. So I don't know, it really worked for me. It was one that I was kind of hoping I would like, and I ended up just absolutely loving. And
For me, I'm sort of solidly in the middle, probably closer to Courtney. But one frustration about the film is I didn't think it gave enough credit to the audience to allow certain characters to be three-dimensional. As crazy as they spend so much time on texture and they spend so much time on this, but the drug addict father, the crazy coked up mom, but especially the out of touch administrator. Look, I understand why they're doing this and what relates these three characters to each other, and why this film is very much trying to simplify who is this and who is that. But I thought if those characters, you felt they were good at their job and still failing, that is much more interesting to me. Whereas all of them felt like terrible parents and a terrible clueless administrator. I'm well aware that exists, and that is not such a stretch to actually deal with. But the way that it was articulated, I thought it would have been much more interesting if somebody was well-meaning and competent and still not connecting with the community. That's much better than to make basically a two-dimensional character, so that you make the other one, the other teacher, this sort of almost heavenly, perfect person who's sort of going out of her way to make the lives of everybody around her a bit better. Pat, you had a point?
Yeah, I would say that would be one fault with the adaptation, is that the book is really set up where all the different sections are framed by correspondence between the teacher and the bureaucrat behind the reading center. And I think they do a better job in the book, I think, of just building the indifference. And I think the fact that the sort of pencil pushers aren't hearing the community's needs, whereas I think some of that was lost. But otherwise it's mostly about the kids. It's not about the parents.
Exactly. So that's why I sort of forgave them. I understand why it's being done to make the movie work, but for me, I would have much rather have been that aimless bureaucrat to have been basically more fundamentally a member of the community and still an incompetent bureaucrat. I think that would have been an interesting twist.
But I don't think I think we have too much of that already. Like I think part of it too, for me, because my wife's a teacher, I hear a lot of like the behind the scenes red tape. And honestly, there are a lot of people that are like that. There are a lot of people that are by the books. We've set up a structure a certain way that do not help the children at all, do not help the community at all. But in their minds, they think they're doing well. Like, I think we have too many stories of well-meaning individuals who basically get a pass because, well, they were well-meaning. And this film shows you that the people on the ground are struggling to try and make these children's lives as best as they could, but the bureaucrats and whatnot are completely clueless, and in some cases they are cold-hearted, that they're just all about the business and balancing the books.
And 100%, I just think it would have been even more interesting if that person who's clueless is also a member of the community. Because I think that there's many people of all races and all shapes and all sizes who are completely clueless bureaucrats. I absolutely, that is the case. Sort of before we go on, let's sort of do a speed round, as it were. We've been talking for a long, long time. Thank you guys so much for contributing to this. Let's start with Emma. Can you give me any other titles that sort of really scream to you? We've certainly mentioned a lot, but is there something that you totally, totally love that maybe we haven't discussed as much?
We haven't discussed Terrence Davies' latest Benediction, which was absolutely one of my favorite of the festival, probably in my top two. I love his work to begin with. It's the slower character-driven pieces are kind of my jam anyway, but this particular one and Jack Lowden in the main role, I'm really happy to see a leading role for him. Not that he hasn't done stage work and things like that, but a major leading role for him that I think really shows his abilities and that he's really a talent to watch. But that was, yeah, I thought an excellent overall movie.
I really liked that.
Yeah.
And Victor, anything scream out?
I really enjoyed, is it Duke Duke or Doug Doug? I think it's Duke Duke, Doug Doug.
Duke, yep.
Yeah, tomato. It was just this great story about the birth of a religion and how it gets co-opted by these different factions trying to use it for their own interest. And it's stylish as hell. It's like 90% montage. It just tells an effective story without saying anything. It's just, I wasn't expecting it. It just like put it on late at night and kept me up till like 1 a.m, just on the edge of my seat. I loved it.
And a film that I missed because the entire screening system was fucked up on the first day. So that's another little bit of bitterness.
That's why I watched it at midnight.
There was 3 films I was going to watch on opening day and I couldn't. So instead I watched a film called The Score, which I absolutely was not supposed to be able to watch. It's not amazing, but it's a gangster musical and it's pretty wild. And because it was a part of the market screening as press, I wasn't supposed to be able to watch it, but everything was so broken. I'm like, screw this, I'm going to watch this movie. And I put it on social media. I'm like, hey guys, this is how broken your system is. And I understand there were meetings at TIFF, like, how did he get to watch this? And that sort of helped the system. Pat, anything that sort of jumped to mind about something that really rocked your world that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, so I would actually want to shout out 3 movies. One was a little movie called Spencer. Kristen Stewart, I mean, so I went into this with high expectations because I thought Emma Corrin just knocked it out of the park as Diana in The Crown. And, Kristen Stewart has really been building a career for herself as such an exciting actress doing unexpected things. And, I think just seeing this performance come after Emma Corrin, you just see how phenomenally good she gets inside Diana's like inner world, her insecurities, and just interprets this character completely anew. And the whole movie exists in her psychology. So I mean, that for me is Best Actress. It's not quite Jackie, but I'm like the biggest Jackie stan going. So
I was going to say, in fairness, we can joke about Emma's love of Cumberbatch, but your adoration of all things here is all good. And I love that you were open to it being amazing, but also open, if it wasn't going to work, you would absolutely let us know. Anyway, what were your other 2 films?
Other 2, so for Cannes films, and this is one hilarious that I fit in the schedule, even though it's 3 hours, was Drive My Car. Because I just had time to kill. I'm like, I don't really feel like going to the office. That was just such a beautiful film. And the characters, and it just had this real sadness and the way it used language and theater and poetry. I loved it. And it was the one that, I think really grew on me more as the festival went. And then the third was also a Cannes film, A Night of Knowing Nothing. So it won the Doc Prize at Cannes, and it was in the Wavelength program here. And I think kind of got lost because it was at like 9:30 in the morning on a PNI, and they didn't have it officially on the digital. But it was such a fascinating kind of essay with like found footage, recreation, about this young woman's like sort of personal and political awakening amid the student protests in India. It was like watching like a young female Chris Marker establish her voice behind the camera. Like that was exciting. So.
Wow, great. Courtney, anything jump?
Yeah, I have. I'll do 3 quick ones. First, Canadian film Learn to Swim. Really,
I knew there was another one.
Really nice, kind of bittersweet romance. Very stylish. Like technically, it's great. The performances are great. I was also another Canadian film I liked was Wildhood, which kind of shocked me because I wasn't really that keen on seeing it, but again, a really nice, tender, interesting romance. And the last thing I will say is, I don't know if you guys already talked about it, but Ben Foster's performance in The Survivor. The Survivor, I think is a little longer than it really needs to be, but Ben Foster is fantastic. So I know we're talking a lot about Benedict Cumberbatch and stuff for the best actor and things, but don't sleep on Ben Foster. I think he might slip into that.
And that's the Barry Levinson one, right? That I missed. And Emma.
Well, I mentioned Benediction already, but the other one, I knew there was one I couldn't bring to mind, but it was Learn to Swim. And just in general, one thing I wanted to say was that a lot of the films I saw this year were from first-time feature directors, and they didn't always necessarily nail everything, but Will Sharp was another one with Electrical Life of Louis Wain, where there was a lot of different ideas. Some of them I think were better than others, but overall, I love seeing these new directors with kind of very clear visions. And Learn to Swim's director, Tyrone Tommy, I think, I'm not quite sure how you say his first name, but had that for me as well, where it's like they have a very clear vision of what they're going for. And it was beautiful, that movie too,
certainly wasn't my favorite, but I definitely think it's worth seeing. It's a film, Encounter, with Riz Ahmed. I just love Riz Ahmed. It's as simple as that. And so it's a relatively straightforward film. The hook is sort of there right in the description. Classic example of just watch the film. You don't even need to know what it's about. Just watch it. And I highly encourage that. I'm sorry, Courtney and Emma, I've already forgotten the name of the film because my head is all jumbled. Learn to Swim, right?
Yeah.
Another classic example of something that I wasn't able to screen. I had all these people saying, man, you got to see, I love jazz. I have a really good sound system. I got everything set up. My schedule didn't allow me to do it, and the brief window was there. And the rest of the time, it was actually geo-blocked for us.
So I think we have to talk about that.
Yeah, sorry. Super frustrating. Look, I understand that, and this is where we come down to, normally I would have had an opportunity, if stuff was in person, to have multiple times in person to see a bunch of these films. Equally, if we were going to do that, to have some way of seeing the digital professional stuff. The press were blocked from some things that Emma, for example, you could have bought tickets for. That would have been awesome if we could have got a link to that. Because we're here, ideally, to help showcase and bring these films to the world. That we're not just sitting here just, watching films willy-nilly. If we find stuff, we will be the ones who are spending the next year jumping up and down about this film. I am dying to see this film. And the fact that it's a Canadian film about jazz, well, not about jazz, but certainly about music, tangentially about that, that's like a total no-brainer for me to actually be gorging on, and I was not able to because of logistical reasons, which is a little bit unfortunate. Pat, I mean, I don't want to go too far into the weeds again, but if there's something specifically you want to say about that, please do.
Well, I mean, I think it was just, I'm a real believer that any film that actively withholds, or anyone who actively withholds their film from press industry should not be allowed a spot in a festival. I think that just goes against the spirit of the whole thing. But I think it really did a disservice to some of the films. Like, I think the obvious one is All My Puny Sorrows, which I think would have been a film that in any other year would have popped, but no one saw it and they couldn't see it unless, you went to the press screening that was scheduled alongside like Spencer and a number of high profile titles. And then, there's also just like a sour taste in your mouth where you're like, okay, you don't want it to see it. You're bringing in talent for your film to Toronto, and you can only talk to them if you're American press. Like, they're just all these things that were really not working in the film's favor, and I don't think it benefited them at all.
Am I the only one that saw it? Yeah, I guess
because you had to,
because I did US,
like, break two people's legs.
Right, and it's, I love the actors. I don't love the movie. And it's, you talk about the weird reactions, as weird as the reaction has been to Evan Hansen. And as sort of Victor, I think that you're sitting back like, what the hell is going on? I hate this movie. Why is what are people not seeing with my problems with it? I think All My Puny Sorrows is going to have a lot of that. We will see how it actually navigates when it plays out. Go in always give it a shot. I think the performances are really great, but I think there's some super, super complicated things. And I will say, we gotta get this on because Pat, I know that you had wanted to talk about it. One of the things that really didn't work for you, that really worked for a lot of people, was Beva. If you could talk about your reaction to that, as sort of chill as we can. But yeah, what didn't work for you? And first of all,
Everything.
before you do, did any of you other guys see the doc? Did you guys see it?
No.
Okay, so Courtney, after Pat, I want to hear your thoughts on the film. So
Well,
Patrick, go ahead.
Okay, I mean, for one, I think it was a beautifully shot film, and I think it seemed like it was like a really exciting thing that, like, had I seen it at like Sundance 1994, I would have, be like, oh, okay, this is really authentic. I did find it kind of derivative in style, but I also just found Hunt, or Beba herself, was just such a repellent character, and made such a point of propping herself up by stepping on the backs of others, like particularly her family and her friends. And I thought it was just so needlessly rooted in pain that I felt like she didn't learn anything. And even when she was sort of carving a space out for herself, it was creating like a pretty strong, like, anti-Latinx racism against like her mother's side of the family. And it was funny because I watched that in a double bill with the Dion Warwick, which was also about like a Black woman carving a space for herself at a very difficult time, and doing everything she could to raise up everyone around her. And yes, we're not supposed to judge characters while watching a movie, but I found it difficult given that the director was the subject and created this sort of ode to herself without a level of critical thinking that we would have faulted anyone taking a portrait of someone else.
Fascinating. Courtney, how did you feel about it?
I liked it. It took me a while to get into the film. Part of it was the style of it. Like when it first started, I thought, oh, is this going to be like a student film kind of documentary? And then I started to get into the rhythms of it. I liked the conflict with her family because I thought that was quite interesting. And then there were some moments that just kind of spoke to me personally. Like there's a very awkward scene she has with her friends, or I'm going to say probably former friends, because if they see this film, I doubt they're going to probably be her friends after that. But it was a moment that felt really true to me because I've been in those kind of conversations where the other side's not quite seeing your view on certain things. So I really felt like that awkwardness kind of took me back to university and different aspects of it. It doesn't always work, but I was interested. Like I had no idea who she was going into this film, and by the end of it, I was intrigued. So it wasn't my favorite of the 7 docs, but I did enjoy it.
Now, I got to ask you, were you aware that they're credited as actors in the film and that was a completely staged sequence?
No,
I was not aware of that.
But it felt very real because I've
been
in that situation.
And that's for me what was super interesting about the film is that it felt a lot of times she was giving us truths, but done in a way which we're expecting them to be done. And it's a complicated film, one that I think that just as there are people who are going to love this uncritically, and there are people who are going to hate it uncritically. I think that, Pat, your points are absolutely valid, and I still think people will respond to this film. Courtney, I think your points are absolutely valid, and I think people will respond to this film. I have much more credit to give to the producers, the editors, the people that made a film out of something that absolutely on its surface should be completely narcissistic, even solipsistic, even masturbatory on the fundamental level. I am all down for having characters that I don't need to love. I hate films that demand I empathize with them just because they are somebody. And so many films, you talk about Sundance, so many films at Sundance, like, I'm just going to show you misery. And we're going to care about this person making horrible decisions because of terrible things happening to them, because we're supposed to somehow get into their headspace. and just understand that they are not in some ways responsible for the awful that is going on. This is not victim blaming here. This is just a film that is so lazy that it doesn't care whether, it's just assuming that we're going to totally buy into their own sort of headspace.
Right.
When the film was not like that, I liked it. When the film was like that, I despised it. And that navigating those two things. And to your point, Courtney, I felt that an incredibly real moment. Look, I don't pretend to do it from the perspective you shared, but I have been that having to explain a country in the Middle East, or having to explain who I am and what I do and why I think. As a kid in university, I've been that sort of outsider being asked to explain everything that's going on. I've been the Canadian having to explain Canada to Americans. That is a very universal and very important thing that still is incredibly specific to her life and her experiences, and I'm taking nothing away. It's not the I feel the same way. It's not that at all. It's that we can see these universal truths in these tiny little moments, and those work for me more than those moments that we had to empathize for. So I think it's an incredibly good film to elicit conversation, and I'm really concerned that those conversations will not take place because people will be afraid on a fundamental artistic way to actually engage with when she is terrible, because she is awful.
Yeah.
In really, really fundamental ways. And
Well,
that is really interesting. Pat.
and I think I kind of want to go back to what I was saying before about how well curated the TIFF Docs program was.
Yes.
Because I thought a lot of my frustration with Beba came from how much I liked Kamala, which was about a young Mexican man tracing through his father's past as a hitman, but also sort of working out who he was as like a young gay man, confronting these ideas of masculinity in a very violent, toxic culture. And he has very difficult conversations with his parents. You know, his mom is completely in denial at the beginning of a great scene opens the film that could have easily opened Beba when he's trying to convince her that, like, yes, your husband killed people. And she's like, oh no, he wouldn't have killed them because he clearly didn't make that much money. And, you know, together they're working through this idea that their lives and relationships were founded on a lie. And there's this sort of collective catharsis in the film and sense of people working it through, which I thought was completely absent in Beba.
There you go. But at least we're going to encourage everybody to see it and make up your own perspective. Emma, you're about to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that you reminded me, talking about those type of films where they're assuming you're going to empathize with. I'm not somebody, you mentioned earlier, Jason, where you're not somebody who turns off films generally or stops watching them. Likewise, this is the first year I turned off, and the digital kind of helps with this too, but it's the first time I've ever stopped watching films. And one of them was specifically, it was called True Things with, I don't know anybody else who saw it, but with Ruth Wilson and Tom Burke.
Oh,
and
that one.
It was, and one thing that was different this year too is that I think on the press digital, you guys had this too, where the directors would give a little 2-minute kind of blurb at the beginning. And so for that one, it was very much the director talking about how it was something that could be universally understood and empathized with. And it was just two horrible people making horrible decisions for no reason that she talked about it as being a universal experience as well. And it was just people being bored, making bad decisions. And there wasn't anything, I don't normally, there's usually something I can find that was redeeming. And in this case, it was that both Tom Burke and Ruth Wilson were very good in their characters and their performances were great, but their characters were just fundamentally awful people that there was nothing to glom onto. There was nothing to, and so that is my first ever TIFF experience, turning off or leaving, in this case, a movie. And it was for that exact reason. So I just thought that was interesting.
No, that's fascinating. And again, it's so funny. People were, as I said, the notion that somehow Dashcam and Titan were related because the protagonists were awful. It's like, well, lots of people are awful.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. You need as a filmmaker to have some way of having us into this film.
Yes.
Anything. It's not that I need to I don't need to empathize with them. I need to understand that every decision being made is a decision being made. And as crazy as it is, I'm going to go back to Evan Hansen, that every single moment of downright sociopathy that takes place in this bloody musical, you're like, oh yeah, I totally, how are you going to go to a mom and say, no, you're wrong. Your son was an idiot and treated me like shit. No, you're going to, and it's these little balls of lies. And the best films are ones where you're having that feeling like, oh, don't make that decision, but you still know why they're making that decision.
Yeah,
You believe
exactly.
it. You believe in the humanity. And if there's a film, documentary, otherwise, that you have some sort of connection, whatever it is, to that humanity. And as I said, back to Scarborough, those moments of humanness, I absolutely was down with. When they became characters, when they became two-dimensional, I lost interest, and I think that's the key to what we find to film festival here. Okay, we've gone on for a very long time. I really appreciate everyone's patience. Those of you that are going to watch this, but more importantly, this my amazing colleagues that helped make TIFF this year. Thanks so much to all of them that contributed. Any sort of last minute things you want to say, Victor? You want to say something real quick?
Watch as many movies as you can. Life is short. Enjoy movies.
There you go, Emma.
I don't think I can improve on that. That's pretty much it.
There you go, Courtney. Anything to say?
It was a good crop of films this year. I mean, regardless of what we could not get access to digitally or in person, there was a lot of good films this year. I have faith that cinema will continue.
And Pat?
I would echo that. I mean, I thought artistically it was one of the best years for the festival based on what I saw. Logistically, some bumps, but I mean, we go there for the movies, and the movies, except Ava, delivered.
And look, we can all be complainers. We can all do it. We saw dozens and dozens of films collectively amongst us. Huge number of films, many of them extraordinary. Some of the best films of this or any other year. I strongly encourage you to actually go look at some of our reviews. If there's a film that you really didn't like, go read what we had to say. If we really liked it, you're going to learn something about that. That's part of this conversation and this engagement. We would really love to hear from you in the comments. But more importantly, we would love you to actually go and experience some of these films for yourself and actually take a chance on them. I will simply underline what has been said by almost all of us. The documentary slate at Toronto is often the best slate, and this year was no exception. Absolutely killer films. If you want your own mini film festival, find a way to watch all the stuff that's showcased here and actually give that a shot. There's so many terrific films. If you have a chance to see them in a safe way on a big screen, definitely do so. Otherwise, simply engage with them, because we have the opportunity long after TIFF is done to live with these films in our memories. Thanks so much for watching for thatshelf.com. Once again, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks to my colleagues, my friends here to help us. To those that weren't able to join us, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to the next film festival. All the best, everybody. Take care.